Welcome to the Business Book Awards Black Lives Matter author interview series. Hello, today I am with Jonathan Macdonald, who is an investor, an inventor, a thought leader, a musician. He's worked with the Ministry of Sound, Lego, Google, IKEA, Apple, Unilever, and he's the author of his fourth book is Powered by Change, which was the winner of our 2019 Embracing Change Award at the Business Book Awards. So Jonathan, I've just touched on some of the many roles and expertise that you have. Would you like to fill us in on the rest?
Well, I much prefer being spoken about rather than me speaking about myself. All I would say is that I've been honoured to, throughout the years, help lots of different people expand the way they think, and that's my purpose in this life is to do that. And I've been lucky enough to work with some people who are very proactive in that space and set up a lot of companies around that. And I'm just really pleased that I can be on this call with you, Lucy. I think you're a testament to the book publishing world, and it's no wonder why you have so many fans around the country and around the world who may or may not even be as vocal as others, but you are adored by many. So it's an honour to be part of this.
That's very kind of you, Jonathan, but let's talk about you.
Okay.
Sorry to pass the buck here.
That's okay.
So I'm talking to some of our authors of colour, particularly around the Black Lives Matter movement. And I just wanted to recall the moment that you came up on stage to receive the award for the Embracing Change 2019 book. And our awards event is a black tie event, and it was indeed full of men wearing black dinner suits, and you had chosen, perhaps at making a point, to wear a very snappy white suit. And as you came up on the stage, Alison, our head judge, who was introducing you, said, "Jonathan, that's a very brave colour to wear tonight." And you said,
I said, "Thanks, I was born like this," and everyone laughed, perhaps awkwardly. And but the reason why I said that was that the topic of diversity in general, be it gender diversity or racial diversity, for me is all encompassing, and one, in my opinion anyway, can't really address one type of diversity without addressing all types of diversity. It's almost like it's kind of all or nothing. It's a binary situation. One is either pro-diversity or against it, and it's not something that you can say, I'm totally up for diversity when it comes to race, but actually women aren't as good as men. And it's just like, and that doesn't make any sense logically or rationally, because diversity is a mindset of inclusion and a mindset of acceptance and an awareness of differences, and embracing that. And therefore you can't have that mindset and only take one part of it. It's a wholesale ambition.
Yeah. Yes. So do I take it from that then that you are constantly aware, or certainly that night were aware of being a person of colour in a very white otherwise environment? Publishing is a very white environment.
It is, and it's one of the reasons why I wore a bright white suit. Actually, I was trying to do the opposite of the white men with the black suits. So I kind of, it's a very cheap trick at standing out from the crowd. But yeah, I think when you walk into a room full of, I used to be the chairman of the British music industry about 20 years ago, and the music industry then, and almost totally still now, was run by white men. And if you could name more than 5 senior executives in the music industry back then, you'd be making it up, basically. And or anyone of any color who wasn't a rap artist. So so I do notice, one does notice it. I don't want to speak of all people of color, but everyone that I know well of color is constantly aware, and it's not something that you kind of wake up and then remember. It's just in the same as walking onto a packed carriage full of 21-year-old drunken men. If you're a single white female, it has a it comes along with a awareness that you could potentially be you definitely look different.
Yeah.
There's a lot of othering going on. And as I've always said to my daughter, who's now 20, you are blessed with something that there is a whole group of people in the world will always try and chase. And the fact that you're intelligent and beautiful compounds that issue, as I'm sure you've experienced. So I think that it's a similar thing when you have of any form of pigmentation of skin. You kind of, it comes with it. It's part and parcel of your experience. You walk into a room, it's basically a sea of white faces, basically male, and you're just like, okay. So yeah, so when Alison said that, I thought that would be a suitable thing to highlight diversity in more than just the gender-based version.
It was very suitable and very telling, and if people laughed awkwardly, I think that was a very good thing to have done. Yeah. And it's a real shame that we didn't get to have our awards event this year, because you were going to present it yourself, and that
I bought a bow tie especially.
No, well, next year, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
You'll have to. Well, you have to come back from Australia to do that, because I gather you're moving to Australia.
Well, I might spend some time over there or somewhere else. Who knows? But the world is increasingly small, luckily, in terms of connectivity, and I'm aware that I need to explore more than just the UK.
Indeed, yeah. No, Australia is a great place to live. I can say that from experience. Yeah. But so Jonathan, you seem to have been incredibly successful. Everything you've done looks like it's turned to gold. You are wanted and sought after by, the biggest companies. And as a thought leader, you've contributed to, as I say, Google, IKEA, Apple, Lego. Do you feel that you've experienced discrimination on account of your colour, or has it just been, is it kind of an awareness that you can't actually put a finger on?
I think that there's a difference between experiencing discrimination and then processing it either positively or negatively. And so I have definitely experienced it, but how I processed it has been a choice. One can't choose whether or not one experiences something in terms of things happening to them, but one can choose how they manage that. And so, from the first day of school, when I got stabbed through the hand with a pencil, wow. For being the N-word, I went back to my adoptive parents and said, what does this mean? What does this word mean? And so for the 11 years afterwards, from 5 till 16, I pretty much experienced that on a ritualistic basis. There was only 3 people of colour in my entire town and county, in fact, down in Surrey. So my experience has been consistent with that. In the workplace, the way I started to use discrimination was as a calling card and a point of differentiation, rather than something that I felt was a disability. And I mean that as a point of an inability for me to operate normally under everyone else's guise of what normal is. And so the professional keynote speaking world and the author world and the thought, I never use the word thought leadership.
I know it's an awful word, but yeah,
but
it kind of says something. It encapsulates something.
Whatever that world is, I had decided in my late 20s, early 30s, that it was a useful point of differentiation to have a different cultural heritage. And I must admit, I think I probably experienced a dose of positive discrimination along with the negative discrimination, because, when I was voted to be the chairman of the music industry, the rest of the board of directors, all the big white, middle, slightly overweight men who were running the music industry at the time, announced that they were really happy with the fact that they had found a young black man.
Yeah.
And I always wondered why they would append that, why they would use such an adjective. It seems to be something that it's the same as saying, I'm really happy that the white female Lucy runs the show here, because it's like, why would you append that with white and female? I don't get it.
No, No, but there's some kind of kudos to be gained from it in some situations. So I guess
Yeah.
you are right to take advantage of that if it works for you, perhaps, or
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you call it out? Do you ask why? I mean, it's a
I,
difficult
d-
one.
it- you know, and I think that everyone who is anything other than what society would class as normal in an industry, um, you, I think you have to pick your battles. And so I've tended, but I also believe that silence is compliance to some extent. So I tend not to, call things out to be combative, because I just do not believe that combat solves anything. I don't think the fire beats fire and hate
No.
beats hate. It doesn't. Not if you zoom out and look at it on scale. You could win one war, but reality is you're propagating violence. So
Yeah.
I've felt to use different channels, writing books, writing blogs, using keynote speeches is a more effective way of combating issues, rather than saying to someone, hold a minute, why did you just say that I'm mixed race? Or why did you just say that I'm of color? Why would you use this? But there's different intentions, right? And so your intention of this call and more inclusion of other versions of diversity is such a positive intention that it's valid to use being of color in this context. Whereas if an intention is one that is potentially cynical or self-serving, then I tend to try and avoid those contexts. So your email to me to talk about this interview was brilliantly clear as far as I'm concerned, made total sense. I immediately jumped at the opportunity, and more of this, the better. This is exactly what people need to do, and I don't see you as a point of any form of cynicism or intent to benefit anyone other than inclusion in the widest possible sense. And that's what the world needs right now.
Well, thank you for that. Has winning a Business Book Award, has it been helpful to you in promoting not just your book, but your business yourself? Has it been a good point of interest?
Yeah, it's had the majority of the outcomes have been positive, and they are that people seem to feel that there is due diligence inherent within having an award. In the same way as getting the chief exec of IKEA to write the foreword to the book, it means that when I then say something, people think, well, he can't just be talking off the top of his head, because
Yes, there's some sort of endorsement there.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. So
I like due diligence there. That's great. I'm going
I
to
don't know
use
why I
that.
went immediately into that kind of legal side of thing, but on the slight downside has been that you do become slightly more in the firing line for attack, and some kind of unforeseen intentions around you, in my case, from people kind of wanting to seize or access and steal the kind of the framework that you've created, and kind of plagiarize your thoughts and use your thinking as a springboard for their own. But I think in general, I've always experienced that. I mean, 10 years before I won the Business Book Awards change category, I was alerted to a guy who'd created exactly my blog in Turkish, including hundreds of blog posts, which he had slightly adjusted from English to Turkish.
God.
And he was basically touting himself as this thought leader from Turkey. And I was gobsmacked. And I shall tell you how I found out about it. Was I was supposed to be speaking at this event in Istanbul, and they cancelled just beforehand. And so we found this other speaker. And I said, that's fine. I said, it happens. You're totally entitled to. We didn't have a contract in place that time. So I'm like, no problem. Well, I hope you have a great event. Can I just ask you who the speaker was? And they said, oh, yeah, it's this guy. And I was like, okay, it's a really small world, professional speaking. So everyone knows each other. And I was like, okay. So I looked him up online. I arrived at my own blog in Turkish.
Oh, unbelievable.
And I was like,
God.
and so I sent him an email and said, hi, I'm Jonathan. You definitely know who I am. So I just wondered whether or not we can come to some agreement that you can maybe write your own content rather than use mine and stuff like that. Bless him, he then not only took down the blog, he also suggested that he didn't do the talk and I did the talk.
Wow.
I said, actually, no, you do the talk and use this as a springboard for your own thinking, but come up with your own thinking, because my thinking is definitely minimal when it comes to the broad spectrum of what knowledge is available in the world. So there's plenty of cake. So take your own bit and do well. And he's still to this day he's actually a pretty well-known Turkish keynote speaker with his own thinking.
That's amazing. That's just such a great story, actually. I mean, your generosity is extraordinary, but the fact that, you've actually created another thought leader is wonderful.
He's really cool.
But I'm really sorry to hear that the Business Book Awards have had a downside as well. But I have to say, I mean, I think that is the case for anybody who is out there and successful, that you will get imitators, and you have to think that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Flattery, and there's no downside linked to the award. The downside is linked to putting your head above the parapet. And it's the slightly a tall poppy syndrome. In the same way, without wanting to bring it back to diversity, well, actually kind of do want to bring it back to diversity. If you're a very, very successful businesswoman, people will ask more questions than they would if you're a very successful businessman. It's like, what did she do to get to that role? Who did she sleep with? Did she have to be a total bitch because, and how did she smash through the glass ceiling, which is heartbreaking. Similar to when you have a black politician who becomes the president of the United States. It's like, well, he can't properly be for black. He can't care about black lives because he's black in the White House. And it's a shame where we don't actually look at it from a colorblind, gender blind perspective and go, there's a meritocracy at place here.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So bringing it back to diversity, we have at the Business Book Awards, we've championed more women writing business books, because we had such a poor showing the first year, and that really does seem to have made a difference. We've championed diversity in its widest sense last year. I'd really be interested to know where you think would be a good place for us to go from here, and how we need to factor in Black Lives Matter to the next Business Book Awards.
Yeah, well, the first thing I think to say is that there's two different parts of Black Lives Matter. One is that there is the fact that Black lives do matter. So let's call that an ideology. And next is the political movement, which is called Black Lives Matter, which is very much a political movement, originally founded by the acquittal of Zimmerman of a murder of a guy called Wavin, who in 2013 to 2014, this movement was created as a political standpoint of non-aggressive retaliation. So that's the political movement, but we also have an ideology. The issue with the political movement side of things is that the chapters, as they call them, of Black Lives Matter are subject to interpretation. So, for instance, the UK Black Lives Matter Twitter account right now is around freeing Palestine, using, sadly, anti-Semitic words such as being gagged and so forth. And that's extremely questionable, and I certainly can't align myself with that. And I think we have to be very careful as to how much we align ourselves with the entire essence of that political movement. However, on an ideological standpoint, I think that there is the general spectrum of diversity is something to look at rather than a specific part. And I think that within the next 1 to 2 months, the term Black Lives Matter will be en masse and wholesale adjusted from being Black Lives Matter to racial diversity being as meaningful as gender diversity, and as meaningful as physical diversity and mental diversity, especially as we start to quantify the outcome of the COVID isolation and lockdown on mental health, and we quantify that on financial health. All of my business vanished within a few days of lockdown. Force majeure contracts meant that the things that were committed couldn't actually go ahead, and so we need to create the quantum of the outcome, and from those ashes, if you like, the phoenix of diversity should rise without, I hope, a concentration on the term Black Lives Matter for those two reasons. One, it shouldn't be about Black Lives Mattering, it should be about diversity mattering, in my view. And I'm saying this as a person of colour. And the second is that the political movement of Black Lives Matter is extraordinarily questionable. And it is amazing that the Premier League, Sky Sports, Mercedes Formula One team, who are now making their entire car black in service of Black Lives Matter, are yet to realise that they are unsuspectingly supporting a political movement with ambition that is far darker than a concern over what happened with Floyd's neck being knelt on, which, just a sub caveat, there is no justification for any form of hatred towards anyone or anything, I believe. The fact that one person's black and one person's white doesn't give any justification for either form of hatred. Therefore, if you have a movement which is anti-white men, I find that as abhorrent as a movement of anything that is against black people. And I fear that we could become too politically correct and think that let's jump on this let's use this terminology now to really push the agenda. But I personally would prefer to look at diversity from a far more broad perspective. Otherwise, we become quite insular. And are we talking about just Black Lives Mattering, or are we looking, what about Asian authors, and what about Arabian authors, and what about disabled authors, and what about, and then in disability we have the physical and mental and so forth. We have to widen the agenda here and not jump on one bandwagon that actually, sadly, is linked to a highly questionable political organisation that is soon to have the emperor's clothes realised.
That's a really interesting analysis of it, Jonathan. Thank you. And so you feel that we should stay on the track that we're on as the Business Book Awards and promote diversity in all its many and varied forms.
Love it. And you're exactly on the right track, from my opinion, and it's only one opinion. And I really admire your pro-diversity agenda. And if you had one word for the future of the Book Awards, if it was diversity, nothing is needed more so. And I would then want to go to the other industries that are run by one particular gender or one particular race and say, you can change too, because look at what happened in the publishing world. This was the beacon of diversity in the publishing world. Why can't that also happen in this industry and that industry and so forth? And most industries, in fact, still are very, very similar in terms of their structure, if you like.
Indeed. Well, yes, the publishing industry is known for being white,
yes.
Predominantly white. So yeah, any inroads we can make there will be good.
Quite
well,
right.
Jonathan, I really hope that you will be fronting our event, our awards event next year, that nothing's going to prevent it happening next year, and that it will be as diverse as it possibly can be. And I hope you'll wear your white suit again.
I will, as a promise to you, yes.
Thank you very much, Jonathan Macdonald.
Thanks, Lucy.